Well, the United States has struck more than 5,000 targets since the war began in Iran. The president says in his press conference today that the operation is ahead of schedule and could be ending soon, in his words, and also said it could go further. Today, he also told CBS that the war was, quote, very complete. Many of the administration's stated military goals appear to remain weeks away, and CNN has learned a ground operation to secure Iran's nuclear stockpile could also be on the table. Joining me now, retired Vice Admiral Robert Harward, a former Deputy CENTCOM commander. He's also a member of the Iran Policy Project at the Jewish Institute for National Security of America, and retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. He's the author of a wonderful new book, which is very moving, called If I Don't Return, A Father's Wartime Journal, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on in the program. First of all, General Hertling, just what's your reaction to where we are right now in this war?
Well, we've portrayed the military element of this campaign as being effective, efficient, and near complete. When we're talking about, as you just said, 5,000 strikes in a 7-day period, 8-day period, that's an awful lot of kinetic operations going on. The question remains, as you've been talking about all night, what's next? What's going to happen after the last bomb drops? What are we going to do? Some of the other things that are creeping up, the potential use of special operations forces, the use of perhaps pulling the Kurds into this. And I know Admiral Harward's going to say some things about that. But that's a tough set of circumstances when you're combining air campaign with special ops with potential conventional operations. It gets pretty complex. I wouldn't say it's easy to run an air campaign, but it's a lot easier than bringing in ground troops.
Admiral, how do you interpret the president's comments today that the U.S. has made major strides in its war with Iran and suggesting the operation may be pretty well complete? Admiral Harward, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you good.
Okay, good. So what do you make of where do you think we are in the war right now? Okay, I think we're having some trouble communicating with the Admiral. We'll try to reestablish contact on that. Just in terms of next steps for the U.S., I mean, a lot of it obviously depends on what the mission is. This idea, though, of ground forces securing actual nuclear material, that seems extraordinarily complicated.
Yeah, it does, Anderson. I'll introduce you to a term you've probably heard before, troop to task. We talked about this during the Russian campaign inside of Ukraine. How many soldiers does it need to accomplish X number of tasks? If you haven't identified those tasks in a country that's three times as big as the country of Iraq, and there are things all over this country, as we've seen with the airstrikes, how many troops is it going to take? What's the military advantage that you get from putting people on the ground? What are they going to be asked to do? And then, after you talk about the fighters, who are the supporters of those? Who are the medics that are involved? What kind of security are the special operators going to get from conventional forces? So it continues to build piece upon piece, and people that don't know much about military operations will say, oh, we'll just throw special operations at it, or we'll just ask the Kurds to do it. They don't really understand the numbers games, the so-called battlefield math of all this.
Admiral, what concerns do you have at this point in the mission?
I think Mark said the same thing. This is a challenge on the ground. I don't say it's insurmountable, but the difference is the people of Iran. We've seen millions go to the streets, so we want to leverage that and support that. It's how we leverage it and how to support it is the real name of the game.
And doing that, General, I mean, that is, there's 90 million Iranians. We've seen, a lot of people in the streets. We've seen a lot of them being killed, a lot of them being imprisoned, tortured. We've also seen today a government-sponsored, show of support for the new regime. 90 million people is a lot to contend with.
Yeah, and they're spread out all over a very large country, a couple of size, like I said, size of Iraq, and also extra large Texas. If you're talking about rural environments, urban environments, you've got a lot of people inside Tehran, Isfahan, Qom, some of the other cities. Very difficult. And when you're also talking about the culture of Iran. It's very complex because there are a lot of minority groups. There are different feelings about the ideology. Some are very supportive of the Shah. Some are very supportive of the Ayatollah. So those are the kind of things that I think are part of the consideration. Anderson, I was in war plans in the Pentagon in 2003, right before we went into Iraq. We had multiple meetings with all of the agencies within the U.S. government to say, what are your roles in all of this beyond the military? The military had a plan. They had a contingency plan. But what were the other agencies? USAID, State Department, CIA, all those. What were they doing and how did they contribute to that? I haven't seen the same kind of one band, one sound kind of thing.
Well, a lot of those agencies also, I mean, USAID and others have been decimated. Admiral, in terms of the Strait of Hormuz, what can be done to try to protect shipping in it? I mean, it seems just incredibly vulnerable, obviously, I mean, not only to missiles coming from Iran and elsewhere, or proxy forces, also, the idea of even mining the straits.
Well, escorts would be a big start. And, our ships are manned with the best counter UAS, against drones and missiles, that we've had in use for over 50 years. It's called a close-in weapon system, Falcon Phalanx. It's been very effective in protecting our ships. So if you have those sorts of ships escorting the merchants, the oilers, I think that goes a long way, but we've got to get the oil flowing. One other thing, back to Mark's comment. I was in Tehran when it fell in '79, and Tehran is the center of gravity. In those days, they had millions of people out on the streets, and that compelled the army to turn. If we're ever to support going after the IRGC and can support those people and flip Tehran, the rest of the country will go the same way. So again, Tehran remains the center of gravity, and you're watching now Israel focus on the IRGC and those nodes inside Tehran. So watch Tehran, and you'll see how this thing's going to unfold.
So, Admiral, you think Israel now is going after the Revolutionary Guard Corps?
Well, we've seen that. You've seen the strikes. You've seen the people. So and that's what we're getting open source. We're seeing that every day. Let's see how this plays out. And I think that's the center of gravity. If the IRGC can turn or be decimated so the people have that advantage, maybe arm the people, that's how this thing flips in Tehran. So yes, I do believe they are targeting the IRGC.
If I can comment on that, Anderson, and this is the same problem we saw in Iraq, not to go to that theater, but when you destroy most of the security forces and the people are left and they don't have an army, they don't have police, they don't have EMTs and the kinds of things that help a society stay secure, that's a fine razor's edge.
Right. I mean,
how much do you deploy?
There was the de-Baathification campaign in Iraq, which left a lot of military-trained people with access to weapons unemployed, without access to their former power, funneling the insurgency.
I was in a room with 400 Iraqi generals the day that Ambassador Bremer announced de-Baathification. You could feel the changing tide in that room when they got the same information I was getting. And it was, at that point, becoming an insurgency, which is very tough for the military forces there.
Wow. How do you think this new Supreme Leader factors into it?
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic. The only thing I'd say, and Bob could probably reinforce this, we look in the U.S., we look at personalities as leaders. The Iranians and most of the Middle East look at institutions as leader, and they maintain those institutions, whether it's a religious institution or a secular institution. So the personalities sometimes don't matter, but I think this is kind of a kick in the face to President Trump that they nominated the son of the former.
Admiral, do you see it the same way?
Without a doubt. And I would add, he's a dead man walking. What I mean by that, as you've seen, and don't forget what happened with the nuclear program there. Whenever someone stood up and said, hey, I'm running the nuclear program, he was gone in the few days. The same thing we did in our counterterrorism. Whenever there was a new leader, he became a target. So I think that's the same situation here. He's now a target. One other thing to note about, when I talk about the IRGC, that's separate from the Artish, the standing army.
Yeah.
So again, targeting the IRGC is different. So that's a little different in Iraq, and hopefully that's one of the components that can turn with the police stuff other than the Basij, other than the IRGC, that can be the background of what the future of Iran will be.
Yeah, Admiral Harward, appreciate it. Thanks very much. General Hertling's going to stay with us. Thanks very much. Up next, more on General Hertling's new book, If I Don't